4 police officers, current and former, out of Louisville, Kentucky, have been arrested and indicted for charges related to Breonna Taylor. You see a picture of her here. We've covered a lot of this on this channel, and today we're going to piece together these new and recent developments, starting with the announcement that came out from Merrick Garland. You see the AP was reporting this today. They said that the DOJ has announced civil rights charges against 4 Louisville police officers over the drug raid that led to the death of Breonna Taylor. Charges range from unlawful conspiracies, use of force, and obstruction of justice, Merrick Garland told us. So we'll take a look at what the Attorney General said, and as well take a look at the press release that came out from the official DOJ Civil Rights Division. But we'll spend the bulk of our time unpacking the charges. Okay, these are the 4 individuals who were ultimately federally charged. You see there was an indictment that brought charges against this guy, Kyle Meany, current sergeant out of Louisville. He's 35 years old. We also have Joshua Jaynes, who was a former detective, age 40. And the allegations are that these people were involved in falsifying a warrant that gave them permission to go into Breonna Taylor's apartment that ultimately resulted in the shootout that left Breonna Taylor dead and bullets flying through the properties of the neighbors, right? This was an apartment complex. The way this went down is law enforcement sort of did this sort of after hours, apparently no knocks. They say they knocked, raid, broke into this apartment, and the boyfriend of Breonna Taylor fired back at the officers. There was gunfire that exchanged, and it left Breonna Taylor dead. So big investigation that took place. All of this happened March 2020. And, this really has been under investigation for quite some time. Joshua Jaynes was a part of that. He has been indicted. We had a second indictment that went to Brett Hankinson, which was really the shooter, the individual who was behind the gun that fired the bullets sort of haphazardly throughout the apartment building. And we have a new face. We hadn't heard of this woman yet. Kelly Goodlett. She was a detective, or maybe current detective, and she also got charged. Now, she was not charged for the same. She was actually charged differently. She was charged with an information, which is more of a direct complaint process rather than a grand jury indictment. So there's kind of 2 ways you can be charged. One is by presenting your evidence and getting a probable cause determination through a grand jury. The other is through a preliminary hearing, and you establish probable cause that way. And then once that's established, then you would file the information. And it's 2 ways to get to the same final juncture, but they're just 2 different sort of routes to get there. So it's a little bit in the weeds, but that's why I have them spread out this way and sort of separated this way. Here, let's take a look at the announcement from the DOJ, Merrick Garland, when he announced all of this. I think this is the first part of it. Yes, here he is. He comes out and says the following.
Good morning, everyone. Earlier today, I spoke with the family of Breonna Taylor. This morning, they were informed that the Justice Department has charged 4 current and former Louisville Metro Police Department officers with federal crimes related to Ms. Taylor's death. Those alleged crimes include civil rights offenses, unlawful conspiracies, unconstitutional use of force, and obstruction offenses. The 4 defendants were charged through 2 separate indictments and 1 information.
All right, so we're going to go through each one of those. Here is a different explanation from Merrick Garland before we take a look at the actual charges. Here he is sort of detailing what this is new, right? This is some new information about why these charges are coming out. And it's in particular, I'm interested in the conspiracy charges and some of the cover-up allegations about what these officers did after they were under investigation.
We allege that the defendants knew their actions in falsifying the affidavit could create a dangerous situation, and we allege these unlawful acts resulted in Ms. Taylor's death. The charges announced today also allege that the officers responsible for falsifying the affidavit that led to the search took steps to cover up their unlawful conduct after Ms. Taylor was killed. We allege that defendants Jaynes and Goodlett conspired to knowingly falsify an investigative document that was created after Ms. Taylor's death.
Wow. So they falsified documents to cover up their tracks. Let's listen.
We also allege that they conspired to mislead federal, state, and local authorities who were investigating the incident. For example, we allege that in May 2020, those two defendants met in a garage where they agreed to tell investigators a false story.
Wow.
This indictment separately alleges that defendant Meany lied to the FBI during its investigation of this matter.
Lied to the FBI, huh? So that means, right, if this happened in March 2020, they met and they spoke with investigators in May 2020. They're saying that they actually lied about that. And so we'll break that down. Here is the official press release that came out from the DOJ, and we'll see the different individuals who are going to be working on this case. Federal grand jury, Louisville, Kentucky, returned 2 indictments unsealed today. We've covered this. We already heard from Merrick Garland. First indictment charges Louisville LMPD Detective Joshua Jaynes, age 40, federal civil rights violations, obstruction charges, Kelly Goodlett, and others. And so actually, we don't need to spend much time on this. I just want to show you this is here. And the different people who are prosecuting this case are here. Michael J. Songer, Anna Gutfried, Civil Rights Division. And so we've got them detailed out here on our mind map. Now, to the good stuff, this is the actual indictment. Remember, these are the 2 individuals who were responsible under the first indictment, Kyle Meany and Joshua Jaynes, so age 35, current sergeant and a former detective. And all of this emanated from drug charges, right? They were investigating drug crimes. And so I saw a comment in here, gosh, I forget who said it, but somebody said, yeah, if you're in Kentucky and you break into somebody's house in the middle of the night, you can expect somebody to fire back. And I think that is sort of a reasonable observation. But this is the first indictment. So this came out, and these are not super long. This is 9 pages, and we can see what it says for us here. It filed August 3rd, Western District of Kentucky, U.S. District Court, United States of America versus those 2 guys, Joshua Jaynes and Kyle Meany. The grand jury came out, and so they presented this evidence to, actual citizens of Kentucky, and they said, hey, this is what we've got. Do you think there's enough here? And they said yes. Breonna Taylor, 26-year-old woman, March 2020, lived in apartment number 4 in Springfield, at Springfield Drive. Louisville LMPD in late 2019 formed a unit called PBI, Place-Based Investigations. Early 2020, they were investigating alleged narcotics trafficking in Louisville, 10 miles away from Taylor's home. Kyle Meany, who we showed you, he was a sergeant, supervised the PBI unit. He was employed since 2013. Joshua Jaynes, a detective in the PBI unit, started early 2020, worked for them for 15 years. KG is an acronym. We don't know who that is. Was a detective. Actually, that's going to be Kelly Goodlett. Okay, that's who she is. On March 12, 2020, PBI, using affidavits, so the search warrants that were authorized by Joshua Jaynes and Kyle Meany, got warrants to search 5 properties. Told the judge, these are all good. We filled it out. Here's the time we want to go. Here's what we're looking for. 4 properties in Louisville that were allegedly used in drug trafficking. Also, Taylor's home, apartment 4. Primary target of the investigation was JG, a man who had been previously arrested for committing drug offenses. Joshua Jaynes and Kyle Meany, both Louisville police officers, they knew that the affidavit used to obtain the warrant to search Taylor's home contained information that was false, misleading, and out of date. The affidavit admitted material, and the officers lacked probable cause for the search. They're saying they just falsified the whole thing. Let's see what this says. Jaynes and Meany, both officers, knew the execution of the search warrant would be carried out by armed LMPD officers and would create a dangerous situation for anyone near Taylor's home. On March 13th, 12:45 a.m., okay, so sort of middle of the night, LMPD officers who had not been involved in drafting the search warrant and who were unaware of the false statements contained in the search warrant went to Taylor's home. When those officers broke down the home to the apartment, a guest in Taylor's home, Kenneth Walker, KW, believing the intruders were breaking in, immediately fired 1 shot with a handgun he lawfully possessed, hitting the first officer at the door. 2 LMPD officers fired a total of 22 shots into the apartment, and one of those shots hit Breonna Taylor in the chest. So they break in, Kenneth Walker fires back, totally lawful, totally legal, Second Amendment, self-defense, the Castle Doctrine, defending your home. And the police say, oh, what did you do? 22 bullets going flying all over the place. And Breonna Taylor then is now dead. And they the actual officers who authorized that warrant falsified the whole thing. A third officer moved from the doorway to the side of the apartment and fired 10 more shots through a window and a sliding glass door, both of which were covered with blinds and curtains, just firing like a lunatic all the way through the apartment. Taylor died from the wound to her chest. Count 1, deprivation of rights under color of law. Joshua Jaynes and others were acting under color of law, aiding and abetting other officers, violating people's rights to be free from unreasonable searches. Joshua Jaynes drafted and swore out the affidavit and the warrant, knowing the warrant would be executed with armed officers, but still provided false and misleading statements. He omitted material information and relied on stale information, and it was not supported by probable cause. Kyle Meany approved the warrant. He had more experience, knowing the warrant would be executed and knowing the same things. They all involved a dangerous weapon at the time. Beginning not later, so count 2 on a conspiracy. Now, this is after the fact. Remember, all of this started in March. Then April happens. Breonna Taylor shot and killed. The whole situation exploded. Joshua Jaynes and Meany are sitting around going, we're in deep doo-doo here. And so they come up with a plan. Not later than in or around April 2020 and continuing until June 2020, in the Western District and elsewhere, that's sort of establishing jurisdiction, Jaynes knowingly conspired and agreed with Kelly Goodlett, who we'll talk about, and others to knowingly falsify a document to impede an investigation with the FBI, a federal agent, to stop the FBI from properly investigating this case. Number 2, they knowingly engaged in misleading conduct towards the other person to hinder and delay federal law enforcement officials. They talk about the manner, means, and the object of the conspiracy. The object was to cover up the fact that the Springfield Drive warrant was false, misleading, and stale. And what did they do? They submitted a false investigative letter and they made false statement to criminal investigators. They had a manner and a means in this conspiracy. They adopted, expanded upon the warrant's affidavit, and they sort of expanded upon it. So they layered on another letter after the fact. They said, oh, this warrant's bad. Well, let's just layer something else on top. It's doubling down on the lie. It was in furtherance of the conspiracy, Jaynes and KG called and texted and they met with each other and they discussed the false information. So they got their emails and their phone calls and their text messages. Hey, what should we say? Where should we meet? What should we talk about? They coordinated their false stories in an attempt to escape responsibilities for their roles. They also furthered the conspiracy by contacting other officers and pressuring them to provide false information in support of the warrant. Further conspiracy from KG making false statements to others as this unfolded. We've got some overt acts here. In or around April to May, Jaynes and a fellow officer, JM, he called JM. So Joshua Jaynes calls this guy, let's say, we'll call him Joe. He says, hey, JM. He says JG had received packages at Taylor's apartment. Try to get JM to say that he had previously told Joshua Jaynes that JG had received packages at Taylor's apartment. So he says, hey, Joe, can you help me out here? Can you say that you got packages at Taylor's apartment? In fact, JM had told Joshua Jaynes that in January 2020, he had no information showing that JG received packages at that apartment. And during a post-shooting call in April, JM again told Joshua Jaynes he was unaware of any information at Taylor's apartment. Nothing. No information at all. And he calls him back. Hey, can you just say this? Like a couple of high school kids. Hey, can you tell mom that I'm staying at Bobby's tonight? Yeah, no problem. Sure, I'll tell him. After having been told by 2 officers that the Shively Police Department in April 2020 that JG had not received packages at Taylor's home, Joshua wrote in a letter, he wrote in a letter that he had, quote, verified through JM of the LMPD who contacted the Postal Service that JG had been receiving packages at Taylor's address. So he just lied about it. He says, hey, can you cover for me? No. Well, he puts it in the report anyways. Joshua Jaynes and Kelly included in the investigative letter the misleading claim that a detective, quote, was able to verify through Clear, a law enforcement database, that JG used that Breonna Taylor's residence as his address. Joshua Jaynes and KG both knew at the time the statement was misleading because, as they knew, JG did not live there in February, so they were misreporting. They also say that KG, Kelly, reviewed a draft of the letter sent to her by Josh. So Josh types this up. What do you think of this letter? Sends it over to Kelly. Kelly says, well, change this word. You forgot the apostrophe on that. Add in here that you're innocent. Okay. Containing the claim that JM had verified the addresses. Knowing the statement was false, KG failed to change the statement or to object to it. She signed on the letter, which included the false statement. So she said, no, that looks good. It totally covers my butts. Covers yours? Perfect. On or about May now, we fast forward. They signed and submitted the letter that they had jointly drafted to PBI. Joshua and KG knew the letter was false and misleading. May comes around 2020 after media outlets reported that a postal inspector had announced that JG had not received packages at Taylor's address as alleged in the affidavit. Joshua sent a text over to Kelly that a criminal investigator wanted to meet with him the following day. And he went over to Kelly's garage that night. These two people, Joshua Jaynes, meeting in Kelly's garage. He calls her. He says, or he texts her, Kelly, I'm in deep trouble over here. I've got a criminal investigator who's breathing down my neck. We got to get together and talk about this. You know that letter I sent you that was full of lies? Yeah, he wants to know about it. She goes, oh, crap. Did I sign that too? Yeah, you did. Where do you want to meet? Let's go in my garage. Perfect. When Joshua Jaynes and KG meet in the garage the evening of May 17th, Joshua tells KG they got to get on the same page because they could both go down for putting false information in the Spring Drive warrant affidavit. We're in deep crap here, Kelly. You should take this seriously. During the meeting in the garage, Jaynes and KG agreed to tell investigators a false story. So they cracked one of them and they're turned, claiming that probably Kelly. I'm guessing they turned Kelly, which is why they've got, the information went against her. Claiming that JM had told them in January 2020 that JG was receiving packages at Taylor's home. So they fibbed the whole thing. We now see August 12th, fast forward, KG falsely tells investigators with the Kentucky AG that in January, JM in passing, right now. He told me like at the gym when we were on the treadmill together. Told KG and Joshua Jaynes that he verified JG was getting packages at Taylor's home. Total nonsense. On or about June 14th, during an interview with agents, Joshua Jaynes so he held his lie all the way up until 2020. Falsely claimed that in January 2020, JM made a nonchalant comment that JG was getting mail or Amazon packages at Taylor's home. So these people, now they change it from like, no, it was official. This was all legitimate and part of the record to, no, he mentioned it like at the gym. We were at dinner. We had a couple cocktails. He said, that Taylor's home was getting a lot of drugs. And they acted on it. Liars. Corrupt as can be. Count 3. On or about May 1, 2020, Joshua Jaynes, acting in relation with the FBI, knowingly falsified a document to impede or obstruct the FBI's investigation. He knew that this investigative letter would be used in preparation for a criminal investigation, and he lied in it anyways. He made materially false statements in count 4. He falsely told an agent with the FBI that a paragraph requesting authority to make a no-knock entry at Taylor's home was included in the warrant, because officers on the SWAT unit had, during a preliminary meeting on March 5th, asked for no-knock authority at that location. In truth, and in fact, Meany knew the SWAT did not ask PBI to request a no-knock entry. So he lied about the knockability of it, or whether it was knock or no-knock. Signed off on by the grand jurors here, indicting those two guys. So you see Joshua Jaynes is this guy. He was the one meeting with Kelly Goodlett. They were pretty close with each other. I don't know what the relationship is looking like there, but they met in her garage. It's like a bad Netflix movie or something. And they're sitting around trying to concoct a scheme to get out of the whole thing. So that was the first indictment. We have the second indictment, which is Brett Hankinson. Now, we've talked a lot about him. This one's relatively short. Grand jury charges the same thing here, telling us that Breonna Taylor is 26 years old, Kenneth Walker, 28 years old. CN is a 24-year-old woman at the time. And these were the people in the apartment who lived next door to Breonna Taylor. Okay, so he gets charged. Hankinson was the guy who was sort of shooting all over the place like a Looney Tune, recklessly endangering everybody in the building because he was so panicked. Now, to be fair to him, right, he didn't know what the hell was going on. He got a fake warrant crafted by his other people. his compatriots. On March 12, LMPD, the PBI unit, got warrants. 7 officers executed the search warrant. When he went in there, he got, let's see here. When officers broke down the door, Kenneth Walker fired 1 shot with a handgun that he lawfully possessed. 2 MPD officers returned fire, and Brett Hankison moved from the doorway to the side of the apartment and fired 10 more shots through a window and a sliding glass door, both of which were covered with blinds and curtains. So can you picture this? Can you see what happened here? You've got 2 officers who crack through the door, right? They bust the door down, and they're standing there in the door frame, and they're looking for the target so that they can shoot, and they're not just haphazardly firing rounds through, door buildings. And Hankinson thinks he's in a Hollywood movie, so he sort of, gets out of the doorway, and he just starts firing through the window because he's going to take out anybody who's standing there shooting bullets. Well, somebody hit Breonna Taylor. They say that on March 13th, he acted under the color of law and violated civil rights of Breonna Taylor. Similarly, violated the rights of the neighbors, okay, CN, ZF, CE, saying that they were right to be free from people shooting bullets through their doors, and that Brett Hankinson didn't do that, saying he fired 5 bullets into the living room of the apartment through a sliding glass door that was covered with blinds and curtains. Multiple bullets traveled through the wall of apartment 4 into apartment 3, endangering CN, ZF, and CE. He used a dangerous weapon, and he was intending to kill people, which is obviously true. So, just ridiculous. Now, all of them got charged. The last one who got charged in an information is Kelly Goodlett. And this one is 8 pages. Very similar. She's the opposite of basically Joshua Jaynes, right? She's on the other side of this. And her case has been percolating a lot longer than the other 3, which is why I think they probably cracked her, and she was the one who spilled the beans on Joshua Jaynes. They said, listen, you're going to get indicted, or you can cooperate with us and tell us what happened here. And she said, whatever you need, I'll tell you whatever you want. So she did. Meanwhile, Joshua Jaynes, he's working his way through this process. As late as June, he's still lying to the FBI. He's like, no. Kelly and I were good. She would never turn on me. She did. She's singing like a canary in the next room. So Joshua Jaynes is here. He was a detective of PBI. March 12th, they obtained warrants. 4 properties, March 13th. They executed the warrants, and Taylor died. Goodlett, Kelly, knowingly and willfully conspired to falsify the warrant affidavit, made misleading statements, and it's basically the same thing, right? She was working with Joshua Jaynes to do it. On March 10th, she told Joshua Jaynes that the search warrant did not contain enough recent information connecting Taylor or her home to criminal activity. So she objected to it. She added a paragraph to the affidavit that she knew was misleading, which stated that she had verified from databases that this was a current home address. Didn't do that. After the postal inspector reported on this, Joshua texted Kelly, "We got to meet." They met in the garage. Said, "We got to get on the same page." Kelly agreed to tell investigators a false story along with Joshua. 2 days after the meeting, they met with the public integrity unit, and they both changed their stories. That he was told in passing, right? There it is. So that's the information that was filed against Kelly Goodlett. What a bunch of crooks. All right. So those are 4 officers, seriously bad Popo, who have just, apparently just think it's cool to falsify affidavits, break into people's houses, shoot a bunch of ammunition through the side door, try to kill people who are defending themselves with lawfully owned weapons in their property. Well, there's no basis for the police to be there at all. That is the update on Breonna Taylor, and I have several of these cases marked for follow-up. When the cases progress, we'll continue to see where this goes. And of course, I hope you follow us on that journey as we continue to cover this and other stories